But at the beginning, the two issues driving the campaign right now are Harris has a big deficit on the economy, Harris has a big deficit on immigration, and Republicans were happy tonight and Democrats a little bit nervous that on those two issues, Vance carried it.
Ain't nothing changed, nothing new here to see. This ain't nothing but some political maneuvering. America, welcome to the eulogy, eat it up. It's called political buffoonery.
Hey there, everybody, and welcome to This Week in DUMBmocracy, where we showcase some of the dumbest newsmakers of the week. The latest stop on this crazy 2024 election cycle was the vice presidential debate between Ohio Senator J.D. Vance and Minnesota Governor Tim Walz. Normally, the vice presidential debate, pretty inconsequential, right? Don't get me wrong, there are usually some fun moments sometimes, like Senator Lloyd Benson saying to Dan Quayle,
Senator, I served with Jack Kennedy. I knew Jack Kennedy. Jack Kennedy was a friend of mine. Senator, you're no Jack Kennedy.
Or Admiral Stockdale saying,
Who am I? Why am I here?
Sometimes it's comic relief, but there's really no bombshell moments from these presidential debates normally. But as always, this isn't a normal election cycle. After all, isn't this the most consequential election in our lifetimes since the last most consequential election in our lifetimes? We're going to go through some of the moments from this debate that I found on social media that people are talking about. But let me just say at the get-go here, the face really does say it all. We're going to analyze some of these moments and look at what the media is saying in the wake and the fallout of this vice presidential debate. But before we get to all that, I'm going to ask you guys to please subscribe to the channel, hit that notification bell so you don't miss any other shows. And if you like what you're seeing here in this or any other video on this here channel, I'm going to ask you guys to smash that thumbs up button, like, comment, share the show with your friends, all that really, really good stuff, because all that's going to help the channel grow via the YouTube algorithm. Feed me. Or maybe it's the Rumble algorithm, or the Twitter algorithm, or the Odyssey algorithm, or the BitChute algorithm. Wherever you're watching, I'm glad you're here, and I hope that wherever you are, this video earns your subscription as we talk about some of the highlights and lowlights from this vice presidential debate. We're starting out with a good moment from J.D. Vance, which I believe framed the debate perfectly in his favor. J.D. Vance was smooth, man. It's clear that all the interviews he's been doing and all the prep he did for this debate really paid off. He was articulate. He was great with transitions. He could speak extemporaneously. And he had some good lines as well, like this one here towards Tim Walz, being sympathetic towards Walz's goals in this debate.
Honestly, Tim, I think you got a tough job here because you've got to play whack-a-mole. You've got to pretend that Donald Trump didn't deliver rising take-home pay, which of course he did. You've got to pretend that Donald Trump didn't deliver lower inflation, which of course he did. And then you simultaneously got to defend Kamala Harris's atrocious economic record, which has made gas, groceries, and housing unaffordable for American citizens. I was raised by a woman who would sometimes go into medical debt so that she could put food on the table in our household. I know what it's like to not be able to afford the things that you need to afford. We can do so much better. To all of you watching, we can get back to an America that's affordable again. We just got to get back to common sense economic principles.
You got a gift, my friend.
Some really great lines here, delivered very well by J.D. Vance. Sort of the opposite of what we see from Donald Trump in a lot of ways. Very polished, very prepared, and if I'm being completely honest here, having a positive outlook on the future of America, being optimistic. Trump tries to do that in his debates and his speeches as well, but if you look around the past couple of months, you know that Democrats have been trying to own the vibes. They're trying to be optimistic, positive, almost overly so. J.D. Vance did not want to cede the vibes to anyone on this debate stage. J.D. Vance wanted to sort of turn the tables here, and in doing so, framed the negativity coming from the Democrats with regards to Donald Trump. The gloom and doom about Donald Trump being an existential threat and all the stuff that we've been talking about ad nauseum here on the channel. And he did a really good job of doing that in this clip. It seemed clear to many observers that J.D. Vance was really on his game, especially in the first hour of this debate, where the issues centered around Israel, centered around the economy, a lot of the strong suits of the Trump-Vance campaign. It also was clear that Tim Walz was less than comfortable on the stage, especially when confronted with this question about his travels to China.
You said you were in Hong Kong during the deadly Tiananmen Square protests in the spring of 1989. But Minnesota Public Radio and other media outlets are reporting that you actually didn't travel to Asia until August of that year. Can you explain that discrepancy?
Yeah, well, and to the folks out there who didn't get at the top of this, look, I grew up in small rural Nebraska.
Pulling a Kamala Harris here, starting out his answer talking about his upbringing instead of confronting the question.
I grew up a middle-class kid.
I grew up a middle-class kid.
My mother raised my sister and me. She worked very hard.
My mother was hardworking. She raised me and my sister Maya.
She was able to finally save up enough money to buy our first house when I was a teenager.
She saved up, and it was only by the time I was a teenager that she could afford to actually buy her first home.
I guess she's rubbing off on him.
Town of 400, town that you rode your bike with your buddies till the streetlights come on, and I'm proud of that service. I joined the National Guard at 17, worked on family farms, and then I used the GI Bill to become a teacher. Passion.
By the way, we can talk about Tim Walz's service in the video in the upper right-hand corner of the screen right now, where we went behind enemy lines with my buddy Ross Galloway, who had the same rank as Tim Walz. And, well, I'll encourage you to watch that video and get a good perspective from retired Sergeant Major Galloway.
About a young teacher. My first year out, I got the opportunity in the summer of '89 to travel to China. 35 years ago, be able to do that. I came back home and then started a program to take young people there. We would take basketball teams, we would take baseball teams, we would take dancers, and we would go back and forth to China.
You're not answering my question.
You getting the sense that Tim Walz doesn't want to answer the question here? This is a common debate tactic. You'll see people talk about whatever they want to talk about within the 2 minutes or whatever the time frame is that they have during a debate. But honestly, is there an answer in our future here, Tim?
The issue for that was to try and learn. Now, look, my community knows who I am. They saw where I was at. Look, I will be the first to tell you, I have poured my heart into my community. I've tried to do the best I can, but I've not been perfect, and I'm a knucklehead at times.
Did he really say that?
Oh boy, that's a campaign ad if I ever saw one. Not a really good look here for Tim Walz, calling himself a knucklehead. You're giving too much ground. You can say that you're an imperfect person, just like everybody else is imperfect in their lives, and that would have been good enough. But to actually say, I'm a knucklehead, I can totally see the Trump-Vance campaign running with that in many, many different ways. In fact, I might be running with it in a few short videos in the future. Who knows?
It's always been about that. Those same people elected me to Congress for 12 years. And in Congress, I was one of the most bipartisan people, working on things like farm bills that we got done, working on veterans benefits. And then the people of Minnesota were able to elect me to governor twice. So look, my commitment has been from the beginning to make sure that I'm there for the people, to make sure that I get this right. I will say more than anything, many times I will talk a lot. I will get caught up in the rhetoric. But being there, the impact it made, the difference it made in my life, I learned a lot about China. I hear the critiques of this. I would make the case that Donald Trump should have come on one of those trips with us.
Just answer the question.
What the hell is he babbling about? The moderator wanted him to clear up a discrepancy in the dates that he traveled to China because he claims he was there at near Tiananmen Square. In fact, Donald Trump called him Tiananmen Tim in some recent releases right before this debate. He's tap dancing all around this issue. All he had to say was, I misspoke. I said a certain date, and it wasn't the right date. The record should be cleared up. I wasn't there on that date, and that's really it. I'm imperfect. I forget dates sometimes, and unfortunately, this was one of those occasions. I didn't mean to mislead anybody. I didn't mean to cause a controversy. It was just me not speaking clearly and not speaking accurately, and for that, I apologize to everybody. See how easy that was? See how short that was? Tim Walz took more than 2 minutes to say nothing.
I guarantee you he wouldn't be praising Xi Jinping about COVID, and I guarantee you he wouldn't start a trade war that he ends up losing. So this is about trying to understand the world. It's about trying to do the best you can for your community, and then it's putting yourself out there and letting your folks understand what it is. My commitment, whether it be through teaching, which I was good at, or whether it was being a good soldier or was being a good member of Congress, those are the things that I think are the values that people care about.
Clearly, Kamala Harris is rubbing off on him because that was a word salad. That was just all types of fruits and veggies and garnish and accoutrement that you look at and you think it's okay. It looks pretty, sounded pretty, didn't mean a damn thing. And the moderators picked up on that.
Governor, just to follow up on that, the question was, can you explain the discrepancy?
All I said on this is I got there that summer and misspoke on this. So I will just, that's what I've said. So I was in Hong Kong and China during the democracy protests went in. And from that, I learned a lot of what needed to be in governance.
Was that so hard?
See how easy that was? But he took the long way around. The GPS wasn't on. There was no direct route. He wasn't going for timing. He tap danced around it. It was not a good look for Tim Walz here. And speaking of not good looks, let's get to some of the looks we saw on the debate stage from these candidates. In this clip, Tim Walz is answering a question about immigration and deportation.
What about our CBS News polling, which does show that a majority of Americans, more than 50%, support mass deportations?
Look, we fix this issue with a bill that is necessary, but the issue on this is what happens when you don't want to solve it. You demonize it. And we saw this, and Senator Vance, and it surprises me on this, talking about and saying, I will create stories to bring attention to this. That vilified a large number of people who were here legally in the community of Springfield. The Republican governor said, it's not true, don't do it. There's consequences for this. There's consequences. We could come together. Senator Langford did it. We could come together.
Look at that look when Walz says we can come together. Breaking the fourth wall here. A little Jim from The Office, I guess, from J.D. Vance. He's looking directly at voters at this moment when Walz is speaking like, get a load of this guy. You think you can believe him on this issue? Especially because the moderator framed it about voters trusting Trump more with immigration and deportation. This was one of the funniest moments in the debate for me, certainly one of the most memeable moments, especially when you contrast it with a lot of the faces that we saw from Tim Walz during the entirety of the debate. I mean, just look at some of these here. Look at some of those expressions. It's reminiscent almost of the Nixon-Kennedy debates, where image and the appearance on camera made a difference in voters' minds, being the first televised debate. This is very reminiscent of that because Tim Walz and J.D. Vance both portrayed different emotions here and different, I guess, comfort levels on the debate stage. J.D. Vance, smooth as silk, looking at the camera, not really taking a lot of notes, not being distracting. Tim Walz, his facial expressions, his stammering, it didn't really work out for him. But speaking of this answer about immigration, the moderators decided it was time to play 3-on-1 against J.D. Vance. In that previous clip, you heard Tim Walz mention Springfield, Ohio. It's been a hot button topic when it comes to immigration and what's going on with the Haitian population there. I'm not going to repeat any of the aspersions or any of the accusations out there. You've seen it out there in social media, I'm sure. But the moderators wanted to put a fine point on this reference to Springfield after Walz's answer. And J.D. Vance was not about to put up with the nonsense because the candidates agreed there would be no fact-checking from the moderators.
Thank you, Governor. And just to clarify for our viewers, Springfield, Ohio does have a large number of Haitian migrants who have legal status, temporary protected status.
Well, Margaret, but
thank you, Senator. We have so much to get to.
Margaret, I think it's important because
we're going to turn out of the economy. Thank you.
Margaret, the rules were that you guys weren't going to fact check, and since you're fact checking me, I think it's important to say what's actually going on. So there's an application called the CBP One app where you can go on as an illegal migrant, apply for asylum or apply for parole, and be granted legal status at the wave of a Kamala Harris open border wand. That is not a person coming in, applying for a green card and waiting for 10 years. That is the facilitation of illegal immigration, Margaret, by our own leadership.
Thank you, Senator, for describing the legal process. We have so much to get to, Senator.
Those laws have been on the books since 1990.
Thank you, gentlemen.
The CBP One app has not been on the books since 1990. It's something that Kamala Harris created, Margaret.
Gentlemen, the audience can't hear you because your mics are cut.
So you heard it right there. The moderators had to cut off the microphones. J.D. Vance was offering important context to the statement made by the moderators with regards to Springfield, Ohio, and the Haitian immigration that is landing in that city. And I thought there was important context, and the pushback here was good by J.D. Vance, although people at MSDNC felt like this was mansplaining.
Yeah. And I actually think if you're a woman, that might be the worst moment J.D. Vance had, because he was going to mansplain right over that mute button. He was, and again, I don't pretend to know how everyone will react to this. I think that a lot of women in positions of authority that should command respect just by virtue of that dynamic will see themselves in some dude that disrespected them and talked over. I mean, there was a moment like that with then Vice Presidential in the Harris-Pence debate.
We covered this topic last week on Behind Enemy Lines with Ross Galloway and myself, talking about how all these statements of, as a woman, A, B, C, and D has really been played out. Nobody's going around saying, as a man, I feel X, Y, and Z, or I think 1, 2, and 3, or anything like that. But it's seemingly become acceptable for this appearance that everything is mansplaining now. After all, J.D. Vance is a white cis male, and he's going to be vilified by the left on this. I thought he added an important context to this, and more importantly, he pushed back in the best way possible with extra context and information that, while MSDNC may not have liked it, I think it resonated with a lot of voters out there. But speaking of the mainstream media, I want to talk about some of the reaction we've been seeing to this debate as well. By the way, I picked a lot of clips here. I encourage you guys to watch the entire debate if you're interested in all the other moments. I'm sure you'll see moments from Tim Walz that were really good and some moments for J.D. Vance that were maybe not so good. Go check that out yourself, but when we come back from the break, we're going to look at CNN's reaction to the performances of these candidates. Like what you see so far? Go ahead and smash that thumbs up button. Also, leave us a comment and tell us what you're thinking. And don't forget to subscribe so you never miss another show. If the reactions from CNN that you'll see in this clip is any indication about what the left thinks about this debate, I think there's a lot of people worrying in the Harris-Walz camp about what transpired.
J.D. Vance came to this debate to land a bunch of punches, and he did. He landed a lot of punches in between all the niceties and all of that. And the thing that really stood out to me was that Tim Walz did not seem prepared for it. He didn't respond to a lot of the criticisms and attacks that Vance put on the table. He allowed some clear falsehoods to just go completely unanswered. He allowed J.D. Vance essentially to dodge on a whole host of issues, on climate change, on the issue of his flip-flopping on Donald Trump. He allowed Vance initially to claim that Trump salvaged the Affordable Care Act. It took him several sentences to get to the part of his answer, Walz's answer,
Abby, listen,
where he actually responded to that. I mean, I think there was a clear lack of preparation and execution here on Walz's part.
I think actually it's the opposite. I think he had too much preparation.
Maybe,
yeah. He had so many lines that he was clearly trying to say that he didn't listen and said when J.D. Vance said one of the many things he really hit Kamala Harris on, not Tim Walz, but Kamala Harris, he didn't respond because he clearly had things in his mind. I think the lack of interviews that he has done with national media, with local media, it showed. He needed more reps.
So I agree with a lot of what Dana Bash is saying here. Tim Walz had a lot of canned lines. It seemed like he was uncomfortable on the stage because he had a checklist almost of things that he had to get out there based upon his preparation with the Harris-Walz campaign. J.D. Vance, on the other hand, he's been out in media for weeks now, as Dana Bash said, getting reps, being confronted with arguments from the left in these interviews, seemed completely at ease, knew what he wanted to say, delivered it well, to the extent that they said that he was, dodging things or he was misrepresenting things. I'll leave that for you guys to decide in the aftermath of this debate. I'm not a fact checker. I'm not here to tell you what to think. Definitely go out there and check for yourself. But what I am saying is that the Harris-Walz strategy of not doing a lot of interviews, of not being confronted with inconvenient arguments from the other side in media or elsewhere, didn't do any benefit to Tim Walz here. When he was speaking extemporaneously on the stage, you could tell he was stammering. He would pause. When he was giving a canned line, it's like he had it rote memorization. He was right there with the line that he wanted to say, but he also sacrificed answering questions specifically pointed at him or any vectors of attack that J.D. Vance created in his own answers because he was so worried about remembering everything to say that he wasn't actively listening to what J.D. Vance was saying here.
Don't mess this up, don't mess this up, don't mess this up.
So based on this, I think that Democrats are a little concerned now and maybe having some buyer's remorse about Tim Walz because he was not as promised. He didn't deliver as well as people thought he would on this sort of national stage. If you're coming here for some analysis about who won and who lost this debate, this isn't the place for you. I'm going to give you the same debate analysis that I give to everyone after every debate I ever watch. My candidate was awesome, your candidate sucked. That's what it comes down to when it's all this analysis. Now, there are going to be fact checkers out there telling you what to believe. I'm going to encourage you to watch the entire debate. Look at who answered questions directly. Look at who took attacks on the other. This was actually a very civil debate between these two, and surprisingly so, given the acrimony between the two sides in this tribal climate of politics lately. So watch the whole debate. Make up your own mind. We're close to 30 days out from the election? The time for choosing is almost upon us. Let me know what you think in the comments about this debate. Did I pick good clips for you guys to decide what you liked and didn't like? Was there something that I should have shown you that I didn't? What do you think about J.D. Vance and Tim Walz? Let's all talk about it in the comments together. And as always, like and share the video with your friends, subscribe to the channel, hit that notification bell so you don't miss any of the shows. I'm really interested in what you guys think about this outcome of this debate. And most importantly, will this debate matter in 48 hours, a week's time, 10 days' time? Will people be remembering this debate and using this as the basis for their choice of candidate? Let me know what you think about this video and all the other shenanigans and buffoonery happening every day this week in DUMBmocracy.
All views and opinions expressed here are not necessarily of the mainstream media and may offend some listeners. It's called political buffoonery.